another product wisdom pod with Matthew Himelstein today with us. He is CPO at Mogl. He's got a bunch of interesting experiences, worked at Eventbrite as an entrepreneur in residence, EIR that is, which we're going to talk about. Co-founded a bunch of businesses before that one. Quite excited to have him on. This podcast has been brought to you by podbuyer.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to a podcast. Matt, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about Mogl, M-O-G-L.
Yeah, so I'm Matthew. I am the Chief Product Officer at Mogl. I just got here. I've only been here about 3 months, but prior to this, I founded 3 companies. I've been a product leader a bunch of places. Was an EIR at Eventbrite, and I was also VP of product at a company called Winolo. Mogl is a leading platform for matching student athletes with brand sponsorship opportunities under something called NIL, which is a US-based law that just came into existence 2 years ago. It's a really exciting space. And we're kind of like changing things up on the product development side. We've kind of like focusing on something I like to call radical collaboration across the different domains of product engineering, design, and data.
Tell us about your first startup and App the Game.
Yeah. So App the Game, the initial idea was that it was about being at the game and connecting the fans who were in the stadiums to the fans who weren't. It was a lot of fun, learned a lot. This is the heyday of like mobile. The iPhone had just come out. I think the App Store had just released live in about 2011. So we got me and a colleague from Oxford. We got into the game of startup life. Learned a ton. Found that while we got the app up to number 7 in the App Store, retention was really tough because the conversations from season to season just died out once the season ended. We ended up pivoting that into a company and product we called Swoop. And Swoop Daily Fantasy Sports was the first daily fantasy sports app in the iTunes App Store, and raised a couple $1 million, scaled it, ended up selling it a couple of years later. So, total end-to-end startup ride. Learned a lot, mainly just all on mobile focused.
Right. And how did that feel, that first exit? Because you make it seem like nothing, but you probably hustled your soul out of that one. So how did that feel to get that money?
Oh, I mean, it was like when the deal finally closed, it was a tremendous weight off of my shoulders. I just remember once the money was finally in the bank and like the deal was, like official, having so much energy. And for 72 hours, I was just on fire, and I slept for like a week, because it was a lot of work. You got a small team. We, the company App the Game for the Swoop product, we got up to like 22 employees. But towards the end, we had to like whittle it down to like the core folks, who wanted to stay on and transition to the acquirer. And yeah, I don't know. So it was a tough ride, but like those lessons propelled me forward towards being a product leader and then going to Eventbrite and, helping them identify business risk, before kind of like things change in the world.
Right. And before we get to Eventbrite, want to talk about followup.io. So that was your second startup, only lasted a year. What happened there?
Yeah, so I was actually a product manager at the time at a company called Ticketfly. Ticketfly is kind of like Ticketmaster. Our largest customer was Burning Man. And I started to get enthralled with the Alexa and Google Assistant voice platform. I thought it was the next wave. I thought this voice to text technology was, going to change the world. And so I started working on followup.io on the side. And it was essentially an Alexa app and Google Assistant app that lets sales reps speak their updates to Salesforce over Alexa and Google Assistant. Coded it myself. I got tons of help from like my buddies who were real engineers at Ticketfly. But essentially it was like 600 if-else statements, That being said, it was working, and I had several paying customers, and then 2 things happened. I had a sales call where a company wanted to sign up $30 a month per sales rep for 1,300 reps, but it was over 10 different languages and I think 27 different countries. And then also, Ticketfly was now getting acquired by Eventbrite. And so I had a big decision to make on if I was going to go, move forward with followup.io, or if I was going to kind of go all in on Eventbrite. And Eventbrite hadn't IPO'd at the time. And one of the big decisions big factors in the decision was looking at the underlying tech, and the voice to text technology that Alexa and Google had was pretty terrible at translating last names. And that's how I was doing the lookup into Salesforce. And so since the tech wasn't really there on kind of like one of the core pieces of functionality, and there was a lot of upsiding going to Eventbrite, I ended up, shutting down follow-up and kind of like move forward with Eventbrite.
And in between, did you have a chance to assist a Burning Man?
So when I was working at Ticketfly, I worked Burning Man for 2 years at Ticketfly and 1 year at Eventbrite. And if you've ever gone to Burning Man, prior to working at Ticketfly, I actually went to Burning Man with my friends. When you work Burning Man, it's a completely different experience. You sleep in air-conditioned shipping containers. You get access to something called commissary, which is like hot cooked food for you. There are showers. It is absolutely positively amazing. And then you also have some time to, really enjoy the festivities. But, you're sitting there and you're trying to ensure that the Burning Man, festival, or the, art movement, as they like to call it, is really moving forward as is. So, you have to make sure that the people who don't have tickets can't get in. And I remember this couple came from Minnesota and they forgot their ticket. And they were livid. They weren't going to be able to go back to Minnesota and come back in time on their Winnebago in order to make the event. And so they were actually outside the gate doing naked yoga to try and calm down. And it was quite a sight, seeing, a couple doing naked yoga to try and meditate their way into a better place.
So is that your insights? What insights did you get from spending a couple of your days at Burning Man? Any wisdom that you applied to your business and your personal life, except naked yoga?
Well, from a business standpoint, the economy of Burning Man is just an amazing thing, right? The giving culture where you just give, expect nothing in return. And then based on that entire ethos, everything will just work itself out. It actually works pretty well at scale. For the people who were attending Burning Man when I was there, I think from a product, technology standpoint, at some point, everything will fail in the desert. We had the internet go down, we have sandstorms, you can't there's too much sand on your phone to tap it. So, kind of have to have all of these manual backups to ensure that, a live event in an environment like that can really pull off for success. And then, I think one of the coolest things is just being on a bicycle late at night, seeing all the neon lights and just going to wherever the flow takes you. And so you have this amazing, personal experience where you can learn about new business opportunities, as well as stress testing everything you ever knew about technology all in one place.
So you obviously decided to accompany Eventbrite from their IPO. You were an EIR there. What was that role all about, and what insights have you got out of that experience?
Yeah, so I'm at Ticketfly. I'm working on followup.io on the side. Ticketfly is now, getting acquired by Eventbrite. Decided to go all in. I worked on product a little bit at Eventbrite, but then they had an innovation arm that they were investing in, and that's how I eventually became an entrepreneur residence there. And my pitch to Kevin and Julia Hartz was that I thought that the online events offering that they had, which was nascent and people were really hacking the platform to essentially sell tickets to Zoom meetings, was something that could be a big deal. And I thought it could be a big deal both on the upside of the trend of online and virtual events were going, but then also as a way to de-risk the business because, all of Eventbrite's business was based on physically being able to attend an event in person. And when you look at like, they're kind of like, long tail creator economy, you're a small time creator in New York, you're throwing an event, like you really can only target people who are in like your same borough to try and come. And if you have an online event, all of a sudden your distribution technically throughout the globe, but really, within the Western hemisphere, time zone, English, and then language centric, it radically changed like the business model. And so, I still remember Kevin telling me, he's like, I kind of disagree with the thesis, but you seem really smart, so let's give it a go. And then later on, I heard from the CFO, Randy Bufumo. He said, "Yeah, I kept trying to kill your project, but you kept having like really good like success with your metrics, so we kept it going." And which was a good thing because we launched the effort, which we called digital experiences, which was deeply integrated Zoom, hosting links and Google Meet and all the stuff you can kind of like imagine. We launched that in 2019. And so we launched it in 2019. We had linear growth up to the end of the year. And then obviously, as you kind of like go into the next year, like I'm looking at the data to see penetration of online events on Eventbrite, and all of a sudden it starts to go through the roof. You see all these cancellations in China, right? COVID is hitting. And just nutso facto, I had targets of percentage of online ticket sales as like, my core KPI. We went from 2% of revenue to 80% of revenue, like in the span of a month, in like a very bad way. Julia came up to me and she said, this online events thing ready to go? And I was like, yeah. She's like, sweet. And it ended up being the primary revenue driver, that summer for Eventbrite. Well, they kind of like weathered the storm, which, they're out of now for sure. And, it's a testament to Julie and Kevin's like leadership that they were able to survive, because that could have killed a lot of other, live events companies.
And then you decided to launch another startup.
Well, so from there, I got recruited to join a company called, Winolo. And along the way, my buddy at Eventbrite, he wanted me to work on La Cumbra. And La Cumbra was a crazy idea around, it was basically like analytics for like Shopify to plug into the store shelves. So he wanted me to work on that with him kind of like prior to COVID. And it was starting to kind of take off along with the digital events. And we were starting to kind of get serious about it. And then lo and behold, COVID hit and, everything freaking changed. So I kept in touch with him, but really, moved on to Winolo to essentially take over product and then product leadership there.
Right. And you seem to juggle between CPO and foundership. Is that a healthy balance, or are you truly a founder or a product person at heart, or both?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a great question, right? Like, I think what gives me superpowers as a product person is having been a founder and understanding that, the actual physical software that you build is only part of the overall experience that your end users like are actually signing up for, right? Everything from that first ad of performance marketing all the way down to the customer service, in addition to the products built, actually like counts. And when you start thinking about higher level stuff around product strategy and around how you should be designing kind of the infrastructure for product-led growth, even like integrating with like product-led sales, it really starts to have impact in terms of like how you can, align product to help the business grow. And I don't think a lot of people in product like really understand that, because, they get in to solve tough, problems, and they solve problems kind of like within this, box that, they're given. And I've just found in my career that, the first thing you should do is just question the box and like, why does it look like this? Does your end user care about this? How does your end user get value? And then design, your experiences around that. So I'm definitely like hybrid between the two. I enjoy working on product because I like building things and working with the engineers, designers, and data to do it. Although I will say, as of right now, I have above 10 PRs on prod for Mogl. All of them are for CSS updates on the web, except one, which was a UI view controller update for iOS. So we were joking around, I'm multi-stack. in a very poor way. But yeah, it's interesting. It's fun to build with really talented folks.
Yeah, and tell me about the Mogl product. Why that company? I'm quite bullish on the niche there. Like, how did you evaluate them to accept the role?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So first of all, the opportunity is around this thing called NIL, which is name, image, likeness, which is a 2-year-old rule in the United States, and it kind of like really dramatically changes how student athletes can get compensated, for the work that they do on the field. My first startup in the daily fantasy sports came about because of a legal change, a definition and legal change, and so I was predisposed to kind of like understanding what this really means, because like investors ask you like, why now? Like, what's changed? And you'd be like, well, this law changed. This law happened, so things have changed. So that is kind of like a foundational like opportunity, like check mark. I played sports through college. I actually was a football player at Columbia University. So having like been in sports, kind of like it feels good to like get back to sports and like be able to resonate with your end user on the athlete side. But then when I look at the opportunities out there from like a marketplace perspective, there's really nothing. The competition that currently exists is really selling like SaaS-based software just to service one side of the colleges and the collectives, and the student athletes don't really like get much out of it. And there is a tremendous opportunity to create a marketplace business that matches student athletes with brand opportunities at scale. And we think this could be one of the largest ways for brands to promote themselves going forward, in a couple of years as NIL explodes.
What is the competition building to match what you have right now?
Out there, they really have software that helps the universities facilitate the deals. And it's really like a lot of media sharing. So the university has like pictures and photos of the athletes and they kind of like send it to them. There's fan requests services that, some of these platforms like also offer. But they have really like low traction, and they don't really, on the competitive assessment, they don't really understand how marketplaces work. And so I'm going to be able to leverage a lot of stuff I learned at Eventbrite, which is a scaled marketplace, as well as Winolo, which was a marketplace for blue collar workers, to really drive differentiation and competitive advantage in what I think is going to be one of the bigger opportunities in the next 10 years.
Love it. Yeah, it's just genius. Can you tell me a bit more about that legal change and how is Mogl built on that whole premise?
Yeah, so for years, people have been clamoring for the student athletes to get compensated for the work they do on the field. And even it was just happened where the Pac-12 conference is now decimated, and there's only 4 teams left. That's because 6 of those or 4 of those teams went to the Big Ten, where they're going to get $60 million a year, and other schools went to the Big 12, where they're going to get $30 million a year, and that's because the Pac-12 was only going to offer them $20 million. And so the conferences and the schools themselves are leaving for large sums of money in these television contracts, and the student athletes don't get any of that. And so as these huge sums of money go to the schools, there's going to be market pressure to push that money down to the student athletes. And NIL right now is the legal way to do that. So the student athletes technically aren't getting paid to play, but they're getting paid for their sponsorship options, their name, image, and likeness. And so there's just kind of like legal path for them getting compensated. And, the amount of money spent on March Madness in the United States, in college football, like playoffs, just continues to grow. And it's really only behind like the Super Bowl and the Oscars in terms of, media opportunities in the United States. So it's just, I don't know, it's pretty crazy to think that this is kind of like the forefront of, changing exactly how people are going to be compensated for the next, 10, 20 years.
Huge market. What's next for you? What are your goals for these remaining months of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of product development. We on Mogl, we just launched something called like NIL fans, which for our partner schools, they have a way to display their student athletes so that anybody who's a fan can just go accept and like basically send a fan request to one of these student athletes. We got an iOS app for the athletes coming out that's going to be, dramatically different than what everybody else offers. But we're really trying to invest in kind of like the marketplace dynamics. And without revealing like too much, we believe that, by end of Q1 next year, we'll be strategically positioned to take advantage and scale this opportunity from a marketplace standpoint.
Where can people find out more about you, Matthew, and Mogl?
Yeah, Mogl is mogl.online. We have, we're very techy. We have our own unique URL system. You can find me on LinkedIn. Hopefully we put in the credits, but it's Matthew-Himelstein within LinkedIn. That's probably the best thing. I do check Twitter or X, which is Himelstein, but I'm really more of a voyeur on that platform. Whereas on LinkedIn, I actually like to share some content sometimes.
And I am your host, Charles Cormier. That was the Product Wisdom podcast. If you want to start your podcast, scale one or be invited to one, get great guests like Matthew here. That would be podbuyer.com. That was Matthew Himelstein.